there, single lady. Can you believe it is almost 2022? I can't believe it. It seems like ever since this whole pandemic thing started, that like life has just been going by so quickly. What I want to do today is talk to you about long distance dating. Maybe you're in a position where you're thinking about long distance dating, you're thinking about trying to meet somebody even if they live long distance, but you're not sure about it. So, what I want to do today is I want to give you some helps to help you decide if maybe in 2022 that's something that you want to do. So, in order to share about this and to give you some food for thought, I want to talk with you about a woman who reached out to me. I'll call her Sharon. And she said, Shana, I'm online dating right now and I don't want to move. She told me that she loved her family, she loved her community, she loved living near her family and her friends. And she said, so can I just find somebody in my community instead of expanding my search? So I thought Sharon isn't the only one asking this question, because inside of More Than Matching, which is at morethanmatching.com, it's a service to help you meet a special person. Whenever I ask, are you open to long distance dating? A lot of people kind of hem and haw around this topic because they're not sure. So she's not the only one that's dealing with it, because I hear about this all the time. It comes up a lot with the women that I coach as well. But before I go on, let me say that I totally get it, because when I was single, I was in my late 30s and I was living in Colorado Springs and I absolutely loved it there and I did not want to move. And so I was totally not open to the possibility of even dating anybody who lived somewhere else. So when I tried online dating, and when a friend suggested that I meet her neighbor who lived 4 hours away from me, I wasn't open. So that said, here are 4 tips for us, plus a bonus tip that will help you. And I hope they help Sharon decide as well if you should be open to long distance dating or not. So the first thing that you want to remember is that when you're married, that your husband is your first priority. So it's awesome if you live near your family and your friends and your loved ones, because these people are totally gifts. But let's say that you do marry someone who lives in your community and then they move because of a job change, or you have to move because of some other change and you don't have a choice. Then what you would have to do is say goodbye to living in your family and friends. And I make this point because it's really important. This happens all the time, right? People are really transient. We change our situations a lot. And also, even before beginning to think about getting married, you want to kind of nurture this idea of being flexible and that your husband is your first priority. There was a woman I was coaching recently, and she was telling me about this guy she's been seeing, and she's excited about him, but she's like, but he lives here and I live there and I don't want to move. And I just told her, hey, listen, you don't have enough information yet, because the thing is that you don't know how much you like him. So it's kind of like having these 2 scales, and here's him and here's the moving, and you're like, he's not weighing as much as the not moving kind of thing over here. The thing is, though, is that you just don't have enough information until you get into a relationship. And maybe you would find that someone is important enough to you that you would be willing to move. But like I said, even before you start to think about getting married or dating long distance, you want to start nurturing this idea that your husband comes first. And then, like I said, you also want to remember that jobs can change. So when my grandpa and my father-in-law were employed, my father-in-law is in his late 80s. A lot of people stayed at their jobs their entire lives, but that's no longer the case. So now most people, they change jobs, and sometimes regularly, right? When you look at people's resumes, I used to work for a company and they did a lot of hiring, and I looked at resumes, and lots of times people only stayed at a job for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. So even if you do meet somebody who lives near you, there's a chance that it wouldn't stay that way. So for example, my husband and I, we have moved, I think it's 3 times since we've been married over the 7 years that we've been married. And each move has been unexpected. But my husband comes first, and we're on this journey together as a team. And so it's really important to nurture that conviction that you'll be flexible in a relationship, because marriage requires flexibility. And again, like a lot of people say, well, I don't want to date long distance because of this and that. Well, you really don't know. Maybe you would meet somebody who you think is so awesome that you would want to be with them and you would be willing to be wherever they are. I may have mentioned this before, but there's a woman who was in a singles group that I started here on Facebook. And she was originally from the Philippines and she was living in Australia. And the guy that she ended up marrying was from Texas, I think South Texas. And so they ended up getting together and she moved clear from Australia to the United States, being from the Philippines, right? So you just never know how much your priorities will change depending upon who you meet. So if you knew that you would really meet a wonderful guy, you may change your mind, which leads me to my next point. You want to ask yourself, how badly do I really want to marry? So if you knew that you would meet a man who lived 2 states away, he was a really wonderful guy, that you could build a beautiful life together, that he would make you laugh, that you would no longer feel lonely, that he would cherish you, and that you would experience a lot of blessings that you didn't anticipate just through meeting him and building a life with him, wouldn't you want to do that? So I encourage you to ask yourself how much you really want to marry, because this can help you decide if you want to be open to the distance thing or not. Sometimes when we get older, we get into this can't thing. I can't date someone long distance. I cannot move or whatever. Now, sometimes there are circumstances that make it so that we're unable, like if there's kids involved and we need to stay where we live because of a shared custody thing. But lots of times what we do as we get older is that we put obstacles in our own way and we say that we can't, when really that's just a self-protective defense mechanism, because it's easier to stay where we are doing what we're doing than it is to take a risk. Right? Now, there are exceptions to everything. I'm just giving you some things to think about if you're totally closed off, right? All right. So the next thing is are you anticipating obstacles? So sometimes singles thinks way far ahead, like the woman that I just mentioned when she was saying, I don't think I want to move, right? Well, now she's in a serious relationship with this guy and they're talking about who's going to move and who's going to, whose house they're going to live in, all this kind of stuff. And it's become something that she wants to do. But sometimes singles get way too far ahead of themselves in the dating process and they get in their own way. So they anticipate, for example, why a relationship wouldn't work out without all the facts, sometimes before even meeting somebody. So I get it. Like I said, this can be a form of self-protection. They say, I can't date long distance because I don't have money for plane tickets, or I can't date long distance because my schedule's not flexible enough, or whatever it is. You just never really know how something's going to work out until you get into the position, right? So lots of times singles will start thinking about the obstacles that could be ahead of them. But there's a problem because you just never know, like I said, how these obstacles might be removed. So when my husband and I met each other, we were just friends. We weren't interested in each other. And neither one of us were thinking about an obstacle of who was going to move, because he was living in Colorado Springs. I was living in Atlanta at that time. So neither one of us was thinking about that. It's just so happened that as we walked, that those obstacles were removed. So for example, when we were seeing each other, I was living, like I said, in Atlanta, in a northern suburb of Atlanta, and he was in Colorado. And it just so happened, right, without us thinking about it or planning it, it just so happened that after we started communicating via email and then on the phone, that he got a job, and it meant that he had to travel to Atlanta a lot. Now, there's no way that we could possibly have anticipated that. And not only that, we couldn't have anticipated right before we got married that we would move to Chicago. And we would never have known that a job change in Chicago would lead us to living in Peoria, Illinois, which would lead us to move right back to the mountains of Colorado. So you never know how things are going to unfold. There's no area of life where we get everything like mapped out in front of us, right? We only get enough light for the step that we're standing on, but we get into trouble when we refuse to be flexible because we're just thinking something's not going to work out. And we try to plan it all out, work it all out. You never know how these things will work out. So long distance relationships can work out a lot. Sometimes people say too, that you can't date long distance because you can't really get to know somebody unless you live in the same community as them. It's impossible to get to know somebody, to get to know what they're really like, unless you live in the same community, unless you're hanging out every weekend. That's not true. There are singles that date everywhere, all over probably the globe, the United States certainly, and in other countries where they don't see each other all the time and they end up in happy, healthy marriages, and they're very, very grateful that they married their person. So it is possible to get to know another person even if you aren't living in the same place. A key is not to rush and to take your time. And also, you can get to know each other just through communicating via, Zoom chats and spending time with each other's friends and bunches of other things that are helpful as far as like sending emails and asking each other questions about each other, which my husband and I did. Okay, which is a whole nother topic, which is why I should have never gone there. So anyway, so if you're hesitant about dating long distance, I just want to encourage you that it really is possible to meet somebody. And one of the benefits too is if you're an anxious type and you have an anxious attachment and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about dating, it can be a benefit to you. I had a friend of mine who she was dating a guy who lived in another city. She was in Colorado Springs. He was in Oklahoma City. And she said it was actually beneficial. They're married now. It was beneficial for her not to be in the same place as him for a while because she said it gave her emotions like time to catch up with their relationship, and they got to talk more deeply about things than they would have had they have been in the same place. All right, I hope this has been helpful. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm so grateful for all of you, and I think about you all the time, and you're just such a joy to me, and it's just such an awesome privilege to be able to serve you, and I'm really looking forward to doing the same in the new year. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.